All right. Think you lost me there. Amina, am I good to
Yeah,
go?
yeah, we're good to go. People are slowly joining in, but I think we can begin.
Okay, amazing. Um, so first of all, just want to thank each and every one here for joining us and for joining each other in having this discussion. I'm not going to go too deep into why we are here because I feel like you're going to touch upon that, and I want to give as much of the space to you as possible. I'll just begin by talking a little bit about Kriti, who is our moderator for today. And she is one of the circle's first cohort at the Incubation's Entrepreneur in Residence. Kriti is the founder of LAND, which is Learning Through Arts, Narrative, and Discourse. It's both an education research center where she's building a community of creative practitioners um, as a reimagined language of learning, as well as a place where she works with different stakeholders, which she has in the past as well. Worked with schools, worked with education organizations, and along with that has been a curator and has supported and advised across different universities and colleges from St. Stephen's to the Binale in Kochi. So a lot of expertise, a lot of passion towards not just towards creative pedagogy as a whole, and what that means for arts in education and arts as education, as one of our questions actually posed. A few key programs that she's currently running are the Creative Arts Fellowship, which is an art, as well as an art think tank called Art Medium Circle, which is a school museum program. Because one of the things that Kriti is really passionate about is having a museum in every school, as well as an educator's residency program in Himachal Pradesh called Thinker's Garden. Personally, I find in Kriti a kindred spirit, someone who deeply, deeply values art, aesthetic, and the value of combining all of that, and not just bringing that into life, but making that a lens to life itself. Um, um, a shared common passion for artists and the beauty they create, as well as the beauty in nature, is something that I really value in Kriti. And I am so glad to have you with us and opening up this conversation, Kriti.
Thank you so much, Arshia. I just want to give everyone a heads up that my dog is really going to be barking, so please bear with that. And so before I begin this conversation, I want to introduce the whole panel together. And Nandita here is the co-founder of the Learning Center in Goa and Furthering Education, a not-for-profit organization that assists schools, teachers, parents, and build meaningful education environment. Anmol is an educator, filmmaker, facilitator, currently associated with Furthering Education. He has designed and taught courses in cinema, philosophy, identity, environment, and development, a lot of things. He served as a resident administrator for Sangam House Residency as well. Siddhi, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for a long time as a friend, is also a visual communication designer working at the intersection of education and culture. She is a faculty member at Shrishti Manipal, um, sorry, Art Design and Technology, and also associate with Nalanda Way Foundation. Gayatri is the founding trustee of Chennai Photo Biennale Foundation and director of operations for the Biennale. At the foundation, she leads the children's programming. This includes conducting photography, workshops, building an arts curriculum, and creating a community for young artists and learners and photographers. So before we begin our whole conversation, yesterday when we all were having this very deep thought conversation about what truly is creative pedagogy, and we all came about with certain ideas and notions. And I just request Amina to share the screen with us, and I will open it up to the panelists and ask them to share their thoughts and why they put these words over here. So maybe let's begin with Anmol.
Okay, I think while the quote comes up on the screen, because it's still not shared with me, I can't see it. It's a quote from a novel that I love called Disgrace by Coetzee. And The reason why I wanted to kind of put this as a provocation for what I think arts-based pedagogy is, because often it gets reduced to communication. It's about arts is how you actually end up sharing something in the world. And I think that's a very limited and a limiting idea of what arts and creative pedagogy is. I think when we engage in creative pedagogy, we go to the heart of what it means to be a human being, which is, we are asking questions. Who am I? And why am I there in this world? Like, what do I care about? And those sorts of questions, which make us who we are for me the bedrock of this kind of pedagogy. So hence this quote.
Are you on mute, Kruti?
Sorry. Thank you for that, Anmol. Nandita, would you like to go next? Can you hear me, Nandita?
Sorry, I was on mute. I've got to get used to this. So I kind of resonate and agree with Anmol, but at the Learning Center where we work with children from the age group of 5 to 18, we also we want to build in them a sense of wonder. And also three important R's. Our three R's are not reading, writing, and arithmetic, but it's respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. So how do we engage not only with each other, but with what is our space in the world around us, with the environment around us? What is our responsibility towards it? How do we understand it? How do we protect it? How do we engage? So to bring in all these aspects, without an arts-based pedagogy, we really feel it's not very possible. So that's why we've said that arts-based pedagogies allow students of all ages to understand and express, which is not, again, limited to just expressing or communication, but also kind of understanding themselves. Once you understand who you are, or at least begin that process, then you start engaging and understanding your environment.
Makes a lot of sense, actually. I mean, I really resonate with the point of wonder. I think can be such a core in learning mechanism. And that's something I deeply believe in myself. Siddhi, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, again, I think resonating with what Anmol, you have, and Nandita have said about being more aware, and I think how you interact with the world around you and getting that awareness. And I feel what arts, our creative arts pedagogy allows you to do that is celebrate that unique perspective, which is why I've said I think it's a facilitation that celebrates different ways of seeing, thinking, and doing. And for me, it is guided by contextual and cultural expression. And an example that I often use is that if I ask you to spell apple, there is only one correct answer. But as soon as I ask you to close your eyes and visualize it, or maybe create an apple with your hands, there can be many different ways of doing it, and they can all be correct. And they become a starting point for how you look at apples in the world around you. Yeah, so that's what creative arts pedagogy is for me.
And I think the beauty of it is also that there's never really a wrong answer.
Yeah.
The perceptions are so valid, and it gives you that space of freedom to think and approach these mechanisms in such a thought-through manner. Gayatri, would you like to share through your own practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's already been said, but I think maybe I could add in a little bit of the more practical side of how we approach it at CPB, and that is that we try to equip, because I feel like arts is a space, arts pedagogy is a space that not many people are familiar with. It's an unfamiliar territory to educators, to facilitators, to teachers, and to parents. I think the way we see it is how can we make it simple for them to kind of bring it into the classroom. So it's all activity based, it's hands on. I mean, like Siddhi said, contextual. Those are the ways in which we approach our pedagogy. And then also because we work with different age groups, we also try to see how we can integrate whatever we do with creative arts into maybe what the child is learning at that age.
whether it's math or geography or social science. And the one thing that I think, maybe because of the medium we use, which is photography, for us it's all, and because we use mobile phones, we've never really gotten into the skill aspect of teaching the art form, and we've always gone into the idea of looking and observation and, you know, learning to take in your world first, and then of course using the medium to express yourself. So I think that's the only thing that I wanted to add, is that maybe because of the medium, the skill aspect of it hasn't been our core focus.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Also, I actually agree with understanding the core of it, and actually do not, like, you know, it cannot be a cookie cutter formula for all. It really has to be a uniquely driven aspect of learning for each individual learner and educator. And I also feel that art itself, like, you know, somewhere breaks a hierarchy where both of them can truly come together and learning spaces can be created, as opposed to, you know, just somebody giving you information and you just taking in information, but it really creates an ecosystem of shared knowledge as a collective within that. Okay, so for everybody else who's listening and seeing this video and recording, I would like to share that today's conversation is truly a gathering of educators who bring forward their creative practices that lie at the intersection of experimental interventions, community engagements, and revisioning the ideas of access, resources, and tools developed by them for the uniquely designed learning spaces, engagements, and practices that are creatively filling in the infrastructure for social and ecological gaps. But at the heart of this conversation, they will weave us to the path of what is creative pedagogy. So, I mean, we did get a glimpse of it when we all shared something like this, but I would request Siddhi now that, you know, when we speak about traditional spaces and we speak about how can this learning really go forward, and you have been working with School of Specialized Excellence in Delhi, what is the learnings that you can share with us as a practitioner? What are the spaces which can be created, which can have a larger engagement with multiple learners and educators alike? And how can this creative pedagogy go to a larger ecosystem for some change?
Thank you for your question, Kriti. I will not talk too much about what the project or what the intervention really is, but in short, it is an intervention in the government school ecosystem where a new visual arts curriculum is being introduced. And that's the crux of the project. And I feel I would like to start by saying that what does a creative arts intervention, which is so direct, where you say that this is a visual arts curriculum and this is it is backed by the government and it comes into the ecosystem, what does it mean? Is it curriculum creation? Is it working with the teacher? Do you bring in a new teacher into the school? Do you bring a supporting teacher into the school? Do you work with the HOS? Do you work directly with the learner through the tools of learning? Is it really, this project really makes you question that what does an intervention in the creative arts means? Where do you approach it from, and who do you work with to be able to operationalize it to the last mile, which is eventually the student? But how do you go about it? And it's been very interesting because I have advocated, and I deeply believe that the teacher is at the heart of this, is because if you work with one teacher, it's this group that she is working with, but perhaps wherever she goes next, or how, in whatever way she understands or interprets this intervention, that, or he interprets the intervention that you're bringing, will rub off in the processes and methods and will be carried forward. And that's where I would think the attack or the work really happens beyond curriculum design and beyond tools and communications. And what we've been realizing, and one thing that we've been experimenting with now the last year, is what does it mean for the teacher to experience creative arts pedagogy? Does it stop at the curriculum design, where you communicate that curriculum to the teacher, who then takes it to the classroom, or is there a way of actually working with the curriculum itself through creative arts? So does it, so we've been trying things like experiencing the activities ourselves. So what does it mean for me to be able to do this exercise myself and then come up and realize, okay, this is the learning I'm taking, or this is why it is a visual arts unit plan or a session plan, or what am I really taking to the classroom? And it's been really exciting. I've had teachers in workshops who've created something and have so staunchly said, no, but this is it. There is no other way of doing it, or it is glue. It has to be like this. And it's really light and it's really fun. And my response is, okay, but what happens in a class when somebody else creates a pink outcome maybe, or a yellow? Or how do you respond to that? And I think that creative experience really opens so many other doors that otherwise just a conversation doesn't. For instance, doing an exquisite corpse to say, okay, this is you now, and this is a reflection exercise, but we are going to create you through an exquisite corpse and then start talking about what is the learning of this curriculum or what are you taking to the classroom. So it's really about using creative arts for educators, for our teacher first, for them to experience it first, and then say, okay, you are the expert, you know your context, which we were just talking about, you know how to celebrate your classroom, and you go ahead and take it. And I also feel the other thing that it does is experiencing it yourself opens up so many other ways. It says, okay, but I'm going to work with the social science teacher perhaps and get that story from there. It creates room for what I was just talking about, creative arts pedagogy. But to say, if we are 5 teachers and we've shared this experience, there are 5 different ways of taking it to the classroom. Even because now I've embodied and understood this is the learning, or this is the core objective of what I am doing. But here is a new way, and here is my way of taking it back to the classroom. So it really takes it beyond a black and white paper or a curriculum or a textbook, and allows for creative arts to flourish for the teacher as well, and not just the learner. So I think that's what I want to bring to the table, to the conversation today, is that in the audience or in this group, when we are doing a creative arts pedagogy intervention, who you are working with, what is that ecosystem that you are working with, and eventually how is it going to be translated. It's not really just about the student, but also the teacher or the facilitator, who is the creative art, who sometimes forgets is also a creative arts practitioner, who has a practice but creates this silo and says, no, I'm going to paint here but teach here. But how do those come together through these experiences, which are themselves creative arts experiences, between the mediation? Yeah, I'll stop here.
No, Siddhi, that makes a lot of sense. I also feel like a lot of time educators as the stakeholders, when we're trying to create something, they're always at the background. And a lot of approaches have just been made there, some sort of lesson plans have just been given to them. And we assume that it should just be done in 40 minutes and, we must get the result. And we never really think about even the resources which needs to be enabled for an ecosystem to survive. And also for the enabling of a educator's mindset of what creativity is, because I think sometimes it is so structured that it is just about art is just about a skill, as opposed to it's a thought process. And here I would like to bring in Gayatri and really ask you, Gayatri, that how much I've known you and your work, even at the Biennale, even with the educators and the workshops that you do. I think there is a very thought through approach, not only how you process it and the methodologies that you're working with, but even the elements of engagement that you bring forward. And your publications have been something which have been really remarkable for me as somebody to learn through. And so something as a publication, how is that as a resource enabler in not only surviving the system, but even thriving it in certain contexts? And what does it mean for you?
Thanks, Kriti. Yeah, actually, I mean, thank you for letting me, talk about the publications, because actually the funny story is that the first publication, it wasn't planned like how it came out. This was done for the Biennale. It was, we've been doing the Biennale for a few years now, and we felt that students would come, young learners would come to see these shows, and they would sort of just glance at the artwork, and we would give them a little bit of a tour, but it wouldn't really have an impact on them, or they wouldn't really be engaged, other than the fact that they were outside the classroom and they were excited about being it was like a field trip day. That was nice, but I don't think they really engaged with the art, and that I felt was where we were failing them. We were bringing them all the way to here, but then we weren't really creating a tool, a way for them to engage with what the artist was talking about. So Peer Ponder Play, which was our first publication, was this art mediation tool. We had this idea that let's create a tool where no matter what age group the child is from, we start from age 3 all the way to like a 15, 16-year-old, we would design simple activities so that when the child comes into the space, they have an option to, of course, look at the art and enjoy the art, but they also have the option of doing something right there, simple activity, or they can do this activity at home. And just around that time, COVID happened. So actually, the children could never come to the Biennale. And then the book became our only way of taking our Biennale to the students. And through a few partners, actually, the project took a different shape, because we had also designed it keeping the educator and the parent in mind. The way the language of the book was written, keeping either a class teacher or a parent in mind. So in that sense, we were able to deploy it with a partner who was already working with children. And especially during COVID, it was a miracle for us, because people were looking for activities to do with children. And that's sort of like how it happened, our first publication. But since then, we realized that publication is it's a very strong way to reach a larger audience. We're a small team, and how do we make sure that our more educators or more facilitators have these tools? Because I think what we've realized over the time that we've been working with schools, with parents, with teachers, there's a lot of fear when we talk about arts. People think it's a waste of time, or they don't know what the child is going to do with this. I do an art program, and then so what happens? Because with everything else, there is some sort of goal or outcome. I'm learning coding, or I'm learning, I don't know, something or the other, some example. But I think if you say painting or photography, what are they going to do with this skill that they're learning? So first and foremost, it's kind of like removing the fear of arts itself. And I think that's a big job for all of us to do, is how do we get people to get away from that fear? Because the truth is, people are realizing, and from the NEP and all that creativity and arts is beneficial, but I think they've not figured out why and what is it what is the benefit. So that the articulation of the benefits of creative art practice is something that maybe all of us should be doing more of. Then the next is making these things easy to do. I think, especially in traditional spaces where there is fear and there is anxiety around finishing the coursework and all of that. Now you say, look, add an arts program. It actually usually adds more stress on the teacher or facilitator. So how do we make it very, very simple? So when we design our activity sheets and our handbook, so we actually have a handbook for the teacher and we have activity sheets. We basically spell out everything so that basically the teacher just has to hold the book and just go step by step and say, okay, do this now, do this next, and do this next. And usually, if they follow that, the children will have a creative arts experience, and hopefully over time the teacher will see the various ways in which this is engaging the child. We've seen in the last year some of our programs, the classroom looks more vibrant, the students are more active. Parents are also feeling more engaged, because some of our activities require you to have conversations with your family and things like that. So I think over time people see the benefit, but I think that initial first few years of putting in an arts program into schools, into traditional spaces, is a challenge that we have faced. And I think we are slowly realizing how to make it simple for people who are already quite overburdened to take up this new task. And then the one thing that we add to all of our programs is an exhibition aspect. So, we always have a way in which, no matter how small or large, whatever the children create, we have an opportunity for them to showcase it, not only to just the classroom, but to their school and to the community at large. So we always invite, parents and neighbors and other classrooms or children, their peer group, to come and see the work. So I think for creative arts interventions in traditional spaces, I think it's very important that we take people on this journey, first by removing their fear, but then also by showing that, hey, this is what's possible when you do a project, like when you do arts programs. And it takes time. I think it's not easy to convince people that this is something that a child needs right from a very, very young age. Yeah, that's it.
I completely hear you and completely resonate with the part that it is not easy. And I also really understand the aspect of understanding a starting point, where you are entering, and who your audience is, which is your community. I think that's so important, because also it's quite remarkable, because a practitioner like you and with Chennai Photo Biennale, it also comes a lot of knowledge that you put into this book is also coming from thought through experiences as a practitioner, as opposed to just, creating a buzzword around what creativity could be and sending a booklet out. Because what is tangible is the booklet, and what is not tangible and one can see the outcome is building of a community, engaging with your parents, engaging with schools at a larger context, which could have never been the outcomes when you're putting down anything. But because it comes from a practice, one can truly understand how this knowledge can really play a bigger role. And in that, I would also like to bring in Nandita, because, Nandita, I was just in so much of an awe when I spoke to you, and the depth with which you're working and bringing so many disciplines together. That was something I felt like with arts, usually it's considered to be in a silo, that you're just doing something in a silo. But can we have these interventions where all disciplines are coming together? Can there be a creative bent of mind where, you're also thinking about the ecology, you're also thinking about the environment, you're also thinking about other beings and self and our community at a larger aspect, and create intervention which is so much in depth, where the discourse is not just about what is numeracy, what is literacy, what is creativity as different, but how can they all come together in learning experiences? So Nandita, could you please share about your projects and how you're going forward with them?
Thanks. I'd like to talk about two projects, but they're both interlinked. I do have the distinct advantage of only having 50 kids, so that really helps. But we have 50 children across the age group of 5 to 16 right now, and we have children with different abilities in every group. So I have to give you a little bit of this background to come to the projects and how we organize it. Also, our groups are not age-based, they are ability-based. So in any group, they might, our group sizes are usually between 8 and 12 students. And we have maybe on an average, a 2.5 year age range. And also because one of the main things that I found when I was working in mainstream education is that we were expected to perform, whether it's through an exam or to show what we know, is only through either reading or speaking. I mean, writing or speaking. What happens to people who can't do that? My strength might lie elsewhere. So how do I share how I feel or what I have in my mind? And of course, in many spaces, you're immediately branded, labeled, packaged, and many a time even asked to leave. So it was very clear to us that whatever we brought to the table had to be something that is open to everyone to kind of explore in their own way. So we just started. So till age 12, we have a very interdisciplinary approach. Okay, and we just started with next to our school, there is a field of about, let's say, 10 acres. It's a community field that's there, which hardly anyone cultivates on. So we, of course, use it very merrily to play or to. Then actually one of the children came up and said, well, what else is happening here? Because she came up with a little millipede and said, well, who else is here? And from that started our whole exploration. So for a whole year and a half, we studied the field next to us. Okay, so we divided up into little patches. So all, it needed math, it needed biology, it needed chemistry, it needed everything, right? And if you see some of the slides that I've shared, we actually didn't have any sessions, so to speak, drawing sessions or painting sessions. If you see the artwork in these pictures, they're all done between 7 to 10-year-olds who have no practice, or they've no classes in art. They have seen pictures, they've seen the birds and observed them very closely, or the plants. We've made leaf presses ourselves. And just by seeing it and every day looking at reference pictures and sketch these themselves, found the colors for these themselves. What we found is the lesser inputs we give them, the more they're able to figure out things for themselves. So we then next gave them clay to work with, and then we gave them paper. So it was amazing the kind of things they came up with to study or learn more about whatever it was. And it did not require much. So we just had different stations where children would just go to different stations and just play or work with something for days, sometimes even months together. And through that, we've brought out a whole 200 plus page biodiversity book. We have got recipes that we've come up with, things that we've grown ourselves, found in the fields, found in neighbors' gardens. Sometimes we've also gone and had to buy things to embellish. But any single child will know if I have a cold or a cough or a cut, how can I do something for myself without from my garden or from whatever is around? And that to us is what education is. And will they know mental math? I'm not sure, but will they know the difference between the various species of snakes, whether they're venomous? What's the difference between poison and venom? They can tell you quite easily. So yeah, that's basically how we approach it.
Thank you, Nanta, for this. I think one of the key learning that I am having from this is very often in educational systems and structures, we're so concentrated on if teaching is happening. We never really think is learning truly happening. Everything is just made for teaching, teaching, teaching. But what happens to learning? And also when we think about arts, we feel, okay, we'll bring in arts and maybe the child is going to become better at maths. The child is going to become better at the other thing. But there are no proof points for this in a lot of ways, right? But what does happen is a creative bend of mind where they can research for themselves. They can take actions for themselves. And there's also very less fear of failure, because in this process, it's a space which is being created where failure is somewhere celebrated over a course of time, which is something which all learning spaces should create to nurture what truly a childhood can be. And with this, I would like to bring in Anmol. And Anmol, yesterday when we were discussing, and one thing which really stayed back with me was first was that there's so much hierarchy in learning disciplines. Arts is anyway considered as at the periphery of everything, and or we call it extracurricular, co-curricular, alternative, whatever word we want to use it, but such a fear to call it core learning experience in any context. Within, when we do explore the arts, within that, there's so many hierarchies there as well in the mediums. So, people will be comfortable saying visual arts or painting or, music or photography, but it comes to theater, performance, and, it's always at the backseat. Okay, this could be the fifth or the sixth or the eighth medium of exploration, but never the first ever, right? And when you're sharing your pedagogy, you're sharing your practice, and you're sharing the projects that you bring in, there's a lot of experimentation in this space. It's not structured at all. It's abstract in its nature. So could you share with us how you're going about that?
Yeah, I think first of all, like all the points that everyone has made, I think it's very kind of in consonance with what I'm going to say. And I also have to give a caveat that I'm talking about working in one place really, and while other things are much bigger in Canvas. So I think that's important, the context. Um, I want to share maybe two provocations in terms of my kind of art practice as a teacher. And one has to do with teaching experimental filmmaking, which is, trusting my students, and in fact asking them not to bring us like narrative stories. Because I know even when they are asked to make art, they're asked to reproduce something, or they are told the formulaic kind of way that there are these seven stories and now you have to rework it. How do you break out of that kind of a role and script-based way of approaching the world? And what's really remarkable in this that there is a method to the madness. You have to be as a facilitator. You have to prepare. There has to be a structure, but the structure is there so that you actually can take greater risks, not less risks. So, for example, rather than actually coming up with my own kind of idea of what experimental means to them in terms of films, I would ask my students to say, "Hey, I trust you. go and get me what you think is experimental cinema. So suddenly they are themselves, their lives, their experience become the texts, and then they come to the classroom with that. And already they know there's something different happening because I am trusting to like entrusting them the responsibility of bringing what we are going to think about in the classroom. And building on that, then they go and they try to make these films that uh, cannot make sense in a particular kind of way that they're used to. And what I have learned from it is that creating these kinds of safe to fail spaces has a radical kind of impact on student learning. They get to see the world differently. Suddenly, the logic is not what is happening to the character. The logic is in the colors. The logic is in the sound, right? They are connecting the world in a very different sort of way. Then there's a sense of play. I'm generally working with teenagers, and by this time, play has been reduced to game. And there's a huge difference between playing and gaming. And I think that really is important in creative pedagogy, creating a space for play throughout our lives. It's not limited to a certain idyllic childhood period. And then the third thing is, what experimenting does is that I am basically giving them the permission that, what, there is something good in you already. And now, why don't you trust yourself and kind of whatever medium you're working with, whatever thought you're having, whatever feeling you're having, run with it and show it to us as a class, whatever is it that you want to present. And that sort of belief in your own self, in your intuition, in your way of live. I mean, that kind of self-efficacy, every meta study will show you that that is one of the strongest motivations in terms of drivers of learning. And but I have to say the most radical impact, and it speaks to what Siddhi and Gayatri and even Kirti that you're saying, is that it fundamentally upends my pedagogy as a teacher. I cannot be a teacher anymore. The best thing I can do is model what it means to be a good learner in the classroom. So, and I think this is one of the big issues why creative arts pedagogy is so hard to do. It's not because people don't know it's important. It's not because people don't enjoy it. Because as adults in the room, it's terrifying to lose control. There's no right or wrong answer. Suddenly, you are basically as good as your student in that moment. And who can teach anyone how to be creative? What does that even mean? Right? So those kinds of things, because it's speaking to our textbook culture. It's kind of destabilizing that. It's kind of destabilizing an authoritarian classroom. So I think that really is for me such an the big upshot of this kind of experiment. And I think just connected to that a little bit about the second project, which is at a whole school level, we would do something called theater week, you know, and what we'd see is that almost half the school would be involved in putting up plays, directing, doing background work, or acting. And again, you know, suddenly seeing students, paying attention to their bodies, right? Understanding that their body is an instrument, and it's important to recognize that. And it's not only about PT or sports. And of course, it's not surprising that at the end of the day, when you do something like this, that students are more confident, that they build communication skills. But it's actually not about that. When you build this kind of a whole school approach where you are actually saying arts pedagogy is for everyone, suddenly you have interclass, intergenerational kind of contact between students. They are inhabiting different kinds of ways of being in the world, right? Different people, different ways of thinking. And for me, the biggest thing is it creates a collaborative, non-competitive culture in the school, where put feeling and observing and doing things together at the same level as thinking, which is a huge crisis in our education, that we just think it's all about thinking and other things are kind of atrophied. So those are the kind of two experiences that I wanted to share as an educator. And yeah.
Thank you for that. I resonate a lot with what you've said. Very often when I am seeing what learning mechanisms have become when we say arts, I always see that it becomes an art class, and very often they're just copying a Western artist, what they have done, right? Or Picasso will be copied in some area in India, and then we'll say this is an art or a creative class. But I do remember Dr. Sugdha Mitra, who started the School in the Cloud, said the first curriculum which was made, or what we thought of the first curriculum, was the early cavemen and cavewomen. And they looked up at the sky and said, what is that? Because they were curious. And that's what creativity is. It enables wonder, to unknow, to know, and to keep knowing. And if that spirit is alive in certain contexts, I think then you can truly be a learner for life in certain way, not just to get through some marks for an exam or a college, you want to do, but something with deeper engagement as an individual you can take forward. And I think with this, maybe we can open it up for questions from the audience. And Arshia, maybe you could just, I don't know, ask whichever
Absolutely.
panelist. Yes.
Yes, there's some very interesting questions. What we'll do is we'll see if we can bring some of them on live. Avni, if you're around, Amina, could you bring her live as well?
I'll just do that.
This question was around early years, and specifically when we're talking about pedagogy, what does it
Hi.
entail in early years?
Hi, Avni, we can hear
Go
you.
for it.
Hi, yeah, that was the question basically. She just said it. So we're in the process of actually starting an integral school in Surat. So it follows the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. So creative pedagogy is something that I'm very interested in. And I just don't want it to be kind of limited to the school space that we're in, because I'm based out of Surat, Gujarat. So it's a typical city. It's a concrete jungle, so to speak. So like how Nandita was describing, we don't have 10 acres of field for children to just go and play in. So whatever little spaces that we have, it's essentially, kind of finding those collaborations with people and trying to get these children to those different spaces. So how do you actually, like, what does creative pedagogy for such young children entail? What are the different aspects of it? And how do you bring it alive, for such young children? Is something that I wanted to know.
Thanks, Avni. Nandita, would you like to answer? Or anyone, please? Yeah, you're on. Oh, sorry.
Nandita, you're on mute.
I think the host
okay,
can
yeah.
unmute her. Oh, yeah, she's.
Yeah. So we are lucky we're in the space now, but we were in an apartment before when we began. So what we did was we went for walks. We found interest, whatever we found, dried leaves, waste. So we started even clearing up around us. We came back and we said, okay, it's December. Do you want to plant something? And then we got pots, and when we did things in pots. And I think the whole aspect of creating a little garden and also making that part of your aesthetic is a huge way of kind of bringing children into looking at what beauty is, especially if you're in a concrete jungle. It's always a question I ask parents. How do you want, when they tell me, oh, we want our children to protect the environment, I always ask them, well, what environment? If they're born in a box, they sit in a box in whatever vehicle with wheels and go to another box, that's the environment they're going to protect. So unless you introduce them to some natural environment, however small it is, and around Surat, there's also a lot of places to go to visit. So I would just so we also have a simple thing of all our tables are low seating. I mean, we sit on the floor and our tables are blackboard. So there's always chalk, there's always Play-Doh, there's always material around because to that a child is free to pick up and play with. I think just getting them used to different senses, textures, smells, sights, sounds is vitally important. And it's important to have that space. You don't need to have a tidy and neat and tidy classroom. You need to have uh, a kind of evolving classroom. There should be some instruments around. I mean, you tidy up after, and that's something you all do together. But having what kind of aesthetic you bring into your space, however limited the space might be, really is up to the facilitator. And here I'm very consciously using the word facilitator instead of a teacher, because I think these words do make a difference. Like, we don't call ourselves a school, we call ourselves a learning space. I think we have to generate a new vocabulary to just start breaking some barriers about what we have in our mind. So, yes, if you start small, pots, soil, walks, have different materials in your space. It's quite amazing what you can do with very little space. You might have a terrace, which is also great. You put in, you take a set of binoculars. You start using the terrace in different ways. It's, I mean, Gayatri might be able to add more.
Did you say my name? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I was just going to say that we recently, the Peer Ponder Play was our first publication, but the second one we have, which is the teacher handbook for grade 1 to 3, which I think is the same ages that Avni is talking about. And I mean, a lot of the things that Ananta already mentioned, like about sensorial and touching and going on walks is something that we're focusing on. But we're also focusing on friendships and, how do they interact with each other? Because I mean, for a lot of them, this is the first time they're, maybe going to develop these friendships that might be maybe lifelong also. So how to start, recognizing each other and your individuality? How do you celebrate that? What are the things that are common between you and your friend, or you and your classmates? And how do you celebrate that? But also, how do you celebrate your differences, maybe? So there are some activities we've designed which are keeping those things in mind, like making a finger puppet that shows who you are versus who your friend is, and going on walks together to make a sculpture together, whether you pick up twigs or leaves or whatever, right? So I think it is a celebration of yourself, because you're kind of just figuring out who you are, but also your immediate, friendships. So I think that's the two places that we are kind of working with young children.
Thank you, Gayatri. Thank you, Nandita. I think we had a question from Rahat in the chat about how do you measure the impact that teachers have. Rahat, I'm just gonna allow you to talk, and maybe you can give us more context.
Hi, thank you so much. I've learned so much through this conversation. So for me, something that I keep questioning is when you think about art and it being so subjective in nature, and you're not actually being able to, you don't have a clear outcome like you would in math or let's say English. How do you measure impact? And how do you even measure if a child is learning, like how do you grapple with that kind of situation? Because at the end, if you have an organization, there's some amount of metrics that you need to show, and in that sense, how do you go about doing that?
Well, maybe I can take it up just at a micro level before the people at the macro level can respond to this. I think it's a, I think it's a mistaken view that it's so subjective that you can't tell. I mean, you can't get more subjective than experimental filmmaking. And I promise you, every single student in my classroom agreed which films worked and which films didn't work. It was near unanimous. It was shocking because what it does, it helps us move away from just a fixed idea of what the outcome needs to be to a certain criterion based thinking. For example, when you're looking at a classroom, can we see creativity, right? People can talk about what creativity is and what things reflect creativity and what don't. What reflects certain use of skill. People can tell that apart. And I think it's again one of those, just because art has to do with our inner lives and our subjectivities doesn't mean that people cannot talk about it. That's the entire point of art, that you can dig deep within yourself and yet come to something that other person can resonate with, right? So I think this is one of those persistent myths that I wanted to kind of flag. And I think yes, how you translate this at the macro level in terms of the metrics that maybe your funders and all of them require. And I think I would just say, one can draw certain long, if you do it for long enough, you can draw certain kinds of things. But it's very important to insist on what are the kinds of metrics that you really want to convey to the funders. Because if it's donor driven, then we are stuck in the same rut. I don't think we can get out of it, because then if you want to know whether people can read by the end of this, or like people know what the canon of films is by the end of this, then yes, but it's not arts education. It's just you're making people memorize things about art.
Yeah, I would just like to add to what Anmol has said, because I completely, it's actually a really nice question, because I just say everyone struggles with this so much. Those, what is the learning metrics? What is the graduate aims? What are we reaching out as the outcomes and everything? And I think for a lot of us, then that becomes a driving force of creating anything. Can I say, their learning became a bit better. They were doing this better in their class that way and everything. But what Anmol has also shared is something so beautiful, even in his conversation, because there is absolute method to everything. So even the rubrics that you're going to be engaging with. And so what are the rubrics that you're going to be engaging in, even in the larger context? If your context is even like 50 schools that you're working with and not just one school. So is your rubrics could be something as, were they able to do better research? Were they able to identify more trees other than just saying that, these are the names of the trees? So like somebody like Mr. Pradeep Krishnan, who's done so much around ecology, has always said that do not teach kids the names of the trees. Let them explore and find. By the end of it, if you can also say, because of our projects, kids could identify these many trees. They could create an intervention which was something to do with ecology in a sustainable way. Then you can also show what was those interventions, right? But if it's only going to be something very rubric driven, that, their marks is 33 and it's still 33, that's not the criteria. Because even if the marks on 33 goes up to 37, it is growth, right? And if it's from 60 remains 60, it is stagnation somewhere. So I think one of the rubrics should also be that how you individually deciding upon each learner. And I think it's a mammoth task to do so when you have so many. But if we are entering a space where creativity has to be discussed and learning mechanisms have to come into place, then also facilitation of it has to be very thought through. And I think one of the core areas is like, you also need to discuss further with knowledge partners who are actually working in this field. Very often, the rubrics for maths is like, okay, you need to get these marks. And we just, without our understanding of creativity, we just put the same rubrics of like, what for an exam of maths should be. But I think look at it in a larger context, in a wider way, and somewhere you'll have to fight your case. Otherwise, it's going to be what 50 years we were teaching, and the rubrics were the same, and 20 years ahead, it'll be the same. And yeah, anyone else would like to add?
Yeah, I don't mind adding if it's okay, if we have time. I mean, this is something that we, I think, struggled with in the beginning. We shouldn't measure anything, and we were kind of like very against this idea of measuring the success of the program. But then, because we're a nonprofit and we rely on donors and certain programs, we were kind of like forced into a corner. So then we said, okay, if we really have to do it, then how do we do it? And we do it three ways. One is we talk about what is the buy-in from the school and the stakeholders which are surrounding the children. So one of the things we did in our last program, which we did with almost 800 teachers, was to see what was the impact of the program in the class. right? So we asked teachers, what was the improvement in attendance in the classroom, or what was the improvement in how the students responded in other subjects, for example. So in some cases, we were able to observe through the feedback from the teachers that, this child was not very, outspoken in class, but, during the art class, they tend to speak up more. So there's an opportunity for us to communicate with the child. So communication has improved for certain students, or attendance has improved. So those were some markers with which we measured sort of like the surrounding of the child. That's one. Then the second was the actual like vocabulary that comes with learning arts, right? Like, do they know what is a line and what is color, and are they able to identify what is warm color or cool color? So basic stuff like that. We also measure a little bit of that. Is the child able to identify a few things like this? And then we also talk about 4 C's, which I'm sure everybody here might be familiar with, but I'll say it. Communication, critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration. So this we don't ask the students to do. We ask the teachers to kind of evaluate based on how the activity is designed. Did this activity encourage collaboration in the classroom? Did this activity encourage your child to explore beyond what they already know? Did this activity allow for an open discussion in the classroom? So those are certain things with which they actually they're evaluating the activity itself. No, it's not so much evaluating the children, but we're able to see if the classroom culture can change as a result of the program. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Gayatri. I'll take the last question because I think that'll be relevant for Siddhi, which is how to convince the school even about the importance of art, as they feel it is just for fun. And I think I would add maybe like another layer. How do you actually convince all the stakeholders? I know Gayatri touched upon that. Ambika had a similar question about convincing parents. You work with the school administration and schools. So what does that process really look like, and what goes into it?
I'm a communication designer by education. So for me, I think always talking in a language that the other person wants to hear always works. So like I think Gayatri said, so whoever you're speaking to, what's their buy-in? I feel if you're speaking to a principal, then talking about what this adds to the school to get in. I feel it's important to get in. Then arts and creative arts, like Gayatri is talking about, or Nandita spoke about, I think it does its work in the classroom, and its work with the teachers, and then you can see it for yourself, and you don't have to rely on language so much. I was working at Mirambika, and so we had started the program by talking to the principal and saying, can you please let us, do this with these grades? And and they were very supportive, but our proposal was to start small, do it with one class, get an entry point into the school. But by the end of it, we were welcomed, and it was celebrated that all walls in the school were painted by not just the students, but also the teachers, and also the principal. So I feel that is one strategy that has worked for me, is to get in and then show or exemplify what is happening. Because I think, like Gayatri brought up initially, I think that language gap is very strong, and it hits all of us because we don't know how to articulate what is the case that we are making. I think that's one strategy. I also feel another strategy is we've spoken about context. So how to approach the teacher will be different from how you approach the parent, and how you approach the student will be different from how you approach a funder. So building that strategy and building that what that conversation should be from each of these people. And I also feel perhaps not just what you say, but how you say it. Taking a worksheet was another thing we had done. Was we wanted to speak about art education with teachers, but we thought instead of it just being a conversation, can we take worksheets with us so we can talk about art education while teachers are creating art? So it just so happened that they couldn't say I can't do it because they were doing it. It was in front of them. They couldn't say, oh, this is difficult. But so what? You find a way to do it. In fact, I feel when you take tools such as that, when you are doing and talking, it opens up other conversations which are not the stereotypical things that you often hear or often say, but more nuanced and more genuine. Sometimes is to say, can you maybe just give me these worksheets? Like I said, can you just give me easy tools to make it happen in the classroom and not make me work too much to be able to do it? So I think communication is very important because it gets you in, it lets you do the things you want to do, and make art happen, but to do it strategically and to start and let the work do the talk is one strategy that has worked for me in the past.
Anyone would like to add anything?
I think I absolutely agree with Kriti, and I have to say that what Kriti was also saying earlier, right? Arts education, creative education. I think it's a foolish thing, perhaps, to imagine that suddenly the world will become like really into this. It might come as a buzzword, it might come as a fad, it might come as innovation, which is very different than creative arts education. Because the fundamental thing that creative arts education is, in my view, doing is that it's challenging the social efficiency ideology that drives education, which is what are the economic and direct social benefits of teaching someone. And if that is the case, that's an anathema to creativity, because what is beneficial is what is happening, right? What the incentives are, if you produce more coders, they will get more money. Like that's just like it's unlikely somebody's a sculptor that they will suddenly hit the jackpot and become a great sculptor. That's maybe not going to happen. So this is where I think educators have to really take upon themselves that it is a fact that arts education, creative education has an orthogonal relationship with the world, and that educators have to say, you know what, we think it's important. We can't wait for other people to tell us what the reasons why this is beneficial. We have to do that work on our own and say, we think it's beneficial. There's a lot of stuff to read about, but you have to dig deep within yourself, and there is no substitute for it. No consultant from outside can really save you in that, right? Because it might be a helpful tool, but at the end, we have to do that. And I think somebody else had brought this up, that we can see all the problems. We can see why this is challenging, right? How do you do it in a 50 student classroom, right? How do you do it in a low resource setting? I think Siddhi said something very important. You do it by trying to do it. That's the creative spirit. Creativity is never without constraints. Creativity always happens within constraints. That's the basically the starting condition. And I think, for example, you have 50 students. You don't need to grade everything. Let's bring in peer feedback. Let's actually use that 50-person classroom to our advantage. We can push the envelope further. And the question is, how far are we as educators willing to go? Or are we waiting for someone to give us a ready-made script for creative education, which unfortunately is not going to happen? That's again, it goes against the real spirit of creative pedagogy.
Yeah, I would also say that as facilitators, it requires a lot of planning. You really need to think things through. You really need to understand your space, your the children with you, how you're going to use whatever resources you have. And so ties in with what both Siddhi and Anmol said, that you have to be focused on that. And sometimes I feel, okay, if you're constrained with having to give very standardized reporting systems, at least do it in one session a week. You don't have to do it in every session every day, but one session a week. Just begin. And it's possible. Peer assessment is possible. You'd be amazed to see the kind of interactions. And if we even change the metrics from all these little ticky boxes to tangible and intangible learning outcomes, then automatically you will change the language of discussion and feedback with parents. Then it doesn't become a report, it becomes feedback. So I think we slowly have to bring in these changes, and we just have to begin. Yeah.
I just want to add one last point over here with your way into schools is something which I have always struggled with to articulate this. And I think Arshia would know this because I discussed so much with Arshia that this is what's happening and everything. At the circles, we went through various modes of pitching and actually talking about our vision as well. And, I would find lots of gaps in when I'm speaking about my vision, because I feel it makes so much sense to me, but the other person just cannot hear because I'm living this every day. So like, I'm living the reality, but the other person is just like, but what is art or what is creativity? And I was like, but how do I explain this? And over the course of time, I feel like, you need to bring in your allies into conversation, especially with schools. So we're doing this whole fellowship in Jodhpur, where we're working with 5 schools in the wall city area. And in place of telling them that, why this is essential, we started actually speaking about the future of jobs with them. And we actually started telling them, the key elements for the future of jobs, which the kids who might be now 7 years old and they'll only start working like, after what, maybe 17 years, hence the world would change so much. But some of the key element is cognitive empathy. It is about collaboration. It is about bringing in creativity, right? And if this is what the people who want to hire people are asking for, so how do we create those pitches? Now, it wasn't enough that I am saying it. It was also something that I did, like, you will have so many people who are aligned with your vision at that, as that stakeholder as well, to bring them into your conversation. So we went to schools, to the government, to signing everything with our allies and saying that, this is what our workforce is required and these are the key elements. Are you adding this to your school system? Is that the school system has this? When it comes from the horse's mouth, who's going to be hiring? And then for like a lot of learners, aspiration is to get the first job. And even for the families, for a lot of learners who are coming from such humble spaces, it's not going to be like straight away we can explore, experiment, do this or do that. But if there are allies who are going to be hiring them already and having that vision that this is a very key element, I think that's a very easy in. Then you can bring in a lot of learning mechanism, because then it's not just about what will happen to a child when they're learning this. Is it just a hobby or is it something more? So that's something I wanted to add over here.
Thanks, Kriti. Everyone, will just take one final question because Saisha's questions was just left on the chat. Saisha, if you can just very quickly, concisely ask your question, and we'll be then moving towards a close.
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation. Really, really insightful. I think the question I have was, so there is arts in education, which we've all been speaking about, and then there is arts as education, which is what I think our conversation today also has revolved around. I wanted to really understand in the on-ground realities of things when learning is still so hierarchical. Disciplines are seen, and arts, which was mentioned here, that arts is so often seen on the periphery of things. How do all of you navigate this balance of seeing art, that sometimes, yes, arts in education is important, works, there is value in doing that to learn skills which are cognitive thinking related, but that arts as education is in fact what we're hoping to be able to do.
Okay, who would like to take this?
Is someone
Okay,
sharing? Yeah.
I
I was like,
I'll
okay, I
take a
thought
stab.
Siddhi was sharing, so that's yeah.
I thought somebody else would start, but okay,
Okay.
I can say maybe 2 lines, because I feel Kriti what she was just saying is exactly this, and also I think what Anmol was saying before this is exactly this, is that if you look at it as in education, then your endpoint becomes you do maths better or you do language better, and then you see it as education and you say it's got a longer journey and it goes beyond maths and science and English. But I feel in both ways, arts, I think we're talking about arts as something that facilitates this. We've brought art to the center and all of this has become the periphery. And I think one of Kriti's questions was what happens when arts is at the periphery and everything else is at the center. I think it's about talking and setting these goals and saying what do you want to achieve by doing this. It could be a session, it could be an activity, it could be an intervention. And does it stop at doing maths better or Hindi or English better, or does it go beyond, where it builds collaboration, where it builds cognitive thinking, where it builds EQ for the child? So for me, I think this conversation, it's really who you're talking to and how you have that conversation conversation, because it's to what end? And I feel that end is not math, science, English. It's the end is maybe education, or what is the purpose of math, science, English? Perhaps then is to make that better human, or who understands what is around them and is more aware. So for me, it's blurry, and it's that conversation that you have to have, and how you have that conversation. To what end?
And I feel if I can add, I think it also depends on who we are dealing with here, right? Like in a traditional education setting, it's slightly different. A school with a proper established arts program, the approach is different. So I think it also depends on where they are in their journey of adopting arts into their learning practice. Where you're drawing the balance as an educator, the arts in education and as education. For a lot of the programs that we do, for example, they want to know, hey, what will this child learn some English and some maths at the same time while they're doing this? They want to know that, right? And we have to figure out ways to help them, because clearly that is their main concern at that point. So I think we can't just say no, this has nothing to do with this. I think where they are in their journey is slightly different, so we have to cater to them, especially people like us who I think our main stakeholders are educators right now. So we want to make sure that we're helping them reach their overall goals for the child. But of course, we would like to be in the space of arts as education, and maybe that's something that we will reach. We will reach in a few years, depending on where we are in each of our spaces.
Yeah, one of the key elements is also we always think that creativity is taught, but everyone's born with creativity, and you just nurture environments to enable those spaces, And I think I really did resonate when Nandita spoke about redefining vocabularies, redefining language itself when it comes to the arts or to learning or to anything else, the role of facilitators. And I think it truly depends upon your own individual journey with it as well. Because very often when we're entering the space, we feel that we need to give them this, and we take on that role of the knowledge provider somewhere, and it just becomes an information then, and information is not really knowledge in a lot of manner. But if you nurture a space which gives free thinking, then creativity is anyway enabled. So it's not about arts in education or arts as education. It truly is about what is a learning space and what does it enables in a learner. So not as much like, arts say, ye seekh jayega, ye ho jayega. It's not, I think too many labels have already been given. And if not, something new has to happen, we need to break through in certain contexts. At least that is something for me that I resonate and personally believe in.
Yeah, I'll just add one line, because I mean, it adds to what you said, Kriti, but I think it builds on what Gayatri was saying, is that in a lot of schools, actually traditional spaces, the art teacher doesn't exist, or the art facilitator doesn't exist. And it is often on the maths teacher, and if you go to a primary school in Delhi, a lot of schools actually have one teacher who are teaching all the subjects. So it is about creating that space, perhaps, for the arts in the classroom, and then making those connections between the things.
Wow.
Thank you
Amazing.
so much,
Thank you.
everyone. Yeah. Kriti, everyone else, Nandita, Noel, Gayatri, Siddhi, any ending thoughts, anything that you'd like to talk about? We would also love it if you can share any upcoming projects or initiatives that you all have going in your respective organizations and work. And we would love to hear about that. Get any links in the chat so people can take off from there. Yeah.
Yeah, firstly, I want to thank all the panelists. It was so incredible to speak to all of you, and I learned so much with each one's unique possibilities and practices. I thought that was really amazing. And I think just few of my parting thoughts over here would be that one thing is redefine language for yourself, and that will be so important in the time that we are in. Also, I think I really resonated in the aspect of empathizing with the educators and understanding the starting points, because that is so important, that where we're entering, who's your audience, but never underestimate the learning potential of a child on our own belief is something again, that was something valuable. Regarding the projects, we are at LAND, we are having an art educators conclave in Delhi. And this is going to be happening at Sanskriti Museum on the 8th of December. So anybody who wants to be part of it, there'll be researchers, creative practitioners, and a lot of educators coming together to, have dialogue, not as much as presentations, but dialogue based on what we can take it to our own classes. And the other thing is that we are creating an art think tank, which is going to be enabling a lot of resources for educators and learners alike. And how can we take that forward? We'll be happy to chat with you. Thank you.
And the Anmol, anything going on in furthering education?
I would rather not talk about our projects. What I would like to really engage in conversation further is really, I think, talking about what is education. Because we are talking about different pedagogies, but we are not talking about what really is education. And I know there's some questions that were asked me specifically in there, and I've not had a chance to answer. So if anyone would like to get in touch with me, thelearningcenter.in is our website link. So and our email address, phone number is there. So please do get in touch with us. Anmol and I are happy. Anmol can also talk much more about various other things. I'm not as articulate, but yeah, do get in touch. We keep posting projects there when we do have them, but it's small and it's mostly based out of Goa. So if you're there, please do visit us. Thank you.
So if I can go next. Yeah, so we do have these 3 publications that, one of them is ready and it can be purchased from our website. And I think I'll be in Goa 13th December to 25th December for Serendipity Arts Festival. And there's a publications exhibit there called Text Matters. So if any of you are in Goa that time, I'd love to meet you, and I can show you the publications there as well. And also, I know some people message here if any of these resources are available online. Honestly, because we're a nonprofit, we try to sell these things when possible. But for educators who are looking for tools and resources, please do reach out to me directly. And if I can share the PDFs with you for you to share, for you to use in your classroom, I'd be happy to do that. But we do work with larger organizations to train their educators and to take these programs forward. And that's sort of one of our core activities. And we do photography programs in Chennai. So a lot of the schools in Chennai, we work with them directly where we teach photography. So if any of you are from Chennai or know somebody in Chennai who's looking to add a photography curriculum or art program to their school, please do get in touch. I think our emails and all that are available on the profile of the thing, but otherwise I'm just going to drop my email address here for anyone who's interested.
Yeah. I'll also just paste it again. Siddhi, anything from you?
Yeah, no, I feel it's very important to talk about creative arts. I thought this was a very short conversation because there were so many questions and so many more things to talk about. So I hope the audience gets in touch with you, the circle, to have more of these organizations. For instance, just the imagination of arts itself. I find there's so much within it, and that each of us are talking about here, which is loaded. So to open up those and maybe do conversations about what to do in a 50 people classroom and what to do with the 5 people classroom, so on and so forth. I'm based in Bangalore, so I'm happy to meet anybody who wants to talk about creative arts or communication design. Srishti runs a program called Creative Education, which is a BDES program. So if anybody is interested in finding out more about that and what that imagination entails, I'm happy to answer questions relating to that. I'll drop my email in the chat box too. Thank you for hosting this, and thank you for everybody for their contributions. I had a really good time.
Thank you so much, everyone. And as I was saying yesterday, that all of you have so much to share. We should do a part 2. So please be gracious and give us your dates, and we would be happy to plan this again. Thank you so much, everyone in the audience as well. I'll send all of these links in a follow-up mail along with the feedback form, so you'll have access to this and some of the mails that were shared. Thank you, and I guess that would be it. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you for holding this space, Arshia and Amina. And thank you, everyone. Big love. And
thank you.
All soon.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely evening.
Yes, thank you.